You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. This week on the podcast, we are continuing what I intend to be a monthly series called Tarot Therapy, where I explore tarot through the lens of therapeutic theories and modalities. And today we're hanging out at the intersection of motivational interviewing and the suit of wands, the entire suit. So if you have a deck nearby, go ahead, grab it, maybe put the entire suit out in front of you, all the wands, just so you can kind of hang out with that energy as we're exploring what it means to combine motivational interviewing with the suit of wands. And we're kind of on the heels, not even kind of, we are on the heels of the last tarot therapy episode where I explored the stages of change. And motivational interviewing is typically utilized when someone is wanting to or needing to make a change. So we're kind of just continuing that theme of the psychology of change and looking at how we can help ourselves and also those around us move forward, even when we're stuck in varying degrees of ambivalence or really even burnout. And so as I was reflecting on this concept of motivational interviewing, I realized there really wasn't any better way to explore that modality than with the very action-driven, fiery suit of wands, since it really speaks to both that kind of like personal drive and desire and potential, but also burnout and fatigue all in one suit. So it really seemed to be the perfect suit to describe and explore the concept of motivational interviewing. So for anyone unfamiliar, motivational interviewing is a therapeutic approach or a modality that really helps people work through their ambivalence towards change. And that could be anything from trying to break a habit, work through an addiction, improve aspects of your mental health, or even just make some big life changes. And also, fun fact, this was actually my very first real therapeutic modality that I ever learned to implement as a therapist long ago. And I really enjoyed learning about it as a very new therapist because it just felt practical and it made sense. And it wasn't something that you had to know a lot of really deep theory on, and clients really responded to it. They also felt like it was easy to digest, easy to understand. So if you're not a therapist, you're going to get a nice kind of therapy lesson today. And if you are a therapist and you haven't used this in a while, maybe it's time to revisit. Within this framework of motivational interviewing, there are lots of other different concepts and different acronyms, and I'm not going to get all into that today. I really am going to try to just look at this through kind of a basic fundamental lens and apply the suit of wands to it. But I did want to highlight the four kind of fundamental processes that guide the motivational interviewing and therapeutic experience, because I do think they're important and tie into the suit of wands, which we'll talk about in a moment. So the four of them are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. So I want you to think about that for a second. And as you're looking at the suit of wands, or even just thinking about the suit of wands, thinking about those four words: engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. So when it comes to engaging, this is really about, if we're looking at it through a therapeutic lens, of course, because that's what this is, engaging is about creating rapport, establishing a collaborative relationship with your client. And you're really doing this through active listening, affirming the client's strengths, finding their strengths, really just kind of holding space, finding interest in their life and what's going on, and really trying to kind of understand where their ambivalence lies when it comes to making change. And then we have focusing. Focusing is when you're really kind of like putting your heads together, you're defining purpose and direction, and really just trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to work together to get you to a place where you feel good about the change and you feel motivated for the change. And you also have a clear idea of what needs to change and what you need to do to make it happen. And then we have evoking. And this is probably my favorite aspect of the 4 processes. And evoking is when you're drawing out the client's internal motivations. That's when you're getting deep in there and trying to kind of sift around and really figure out, what is keeping them stuck? What are they ambivalent about? And you're doing this and creating a space free of judgment. Because a lot of times, so motivational interviewing is really seen most often in substance use or abuse and in the field of addiction counseling. So this is where a lot of my knowledge on motivational interviewing lies. And there's so much fear of judgment when you're working with folks who are experiencing that. And so you're really wanting to make sure that you're laying a foundation free of judgment. And that really goes for anything in life or anything. If you're a therapist listening to this, obviously, like that's the biggest thing is, having unconditional positive regard, lack of bias for clients. It's kind of like the big thing that we stand for. But this goes for just also yourself. So if you're listening to this episode and you're working with the cards, also making sure that you're holding space to explore your own ambivalence and any issues that you want to change without self-judgment and without criticism. And then the 4th is planning. So this is when, from a therapeutic standpoint, we're really supporting the client, helping them develop a plan of action, of course, when they're ready, because we also have a saying just in the therapy world in general, you have to meet a client where they're at. And, you've probably heard this too. There's that saying, you can drag a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. The same thing goes for ourselves when we're or working with people, whether you're a coach or a therapist or some other healer. It's really important to make sure that, okay, even if you've developed a plan of action, the client or you or whoever might not quite be ready to implement it. And that's okay. Just kind of holding space for the fact that they have a plan when they are ready and kind of gently exploring, okay, what would it look like if you are ready? How would you know? And yeah, just kind of like allowing that to be a space where you don't have to immediately have an outcome. So again, we have engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. And as you're listening to me talk about these 4 components, I kind of hope you're thinking, oh yeah, this is very similar to the energy of the Suit of Wands, because as I was reviewing these 4 components, that's where my brain went. I was like, oh, absolutely. I can see it in this card and I can see it in that card. Because the wands are all about motivation and willpower and drive. And also an added layer there is the struggle and drive really to stay committed, even when things are getting really tough. I think about this specifically with the 9 and 10 of wands. They're really sticking it out. And as I mentioned earlier, when I introduced the topic at the top of the episode, it's a really dynamic pairing because it really speaks to both drive and burnout all in one suit. We can look at, the even the 7 of wands and definitely 9 and 10 of wands as more of the difficult obstacle burnout cards in the suit, and many of the rest as drive and willpower and focusing and planning and engaging as well. So to really break this down, we're going to walk through the entire Suit of Wands and really look at how each card aligns with the concept of and modality of motivational interviewing. And like I did for the first tarot therapy episode, I'm going to weave in a fictional client case, really just because it helps me understand things a little bit better. And I think it might make it more kind of real, tangible, or easier to digest for all of you. So then maybe you can even maybe see yourself in this fictional client, or just be better prepared to apply some of these concepts to your own life if you're seeing them or listening to them rather be explored through the lens of a fictional client case. So let's talk about the Ace of Wands. It's probably the most exciting wand, in my opinion. I remember when I very first started this podcast, there were a few cards that I was pulling constantly, and it was Eight of Pentacles, Eight of Wands, and Ace of Wands. And I always got so excited when I saw the Ace of Wands because it just felt so just like it was erupting with possibility and just so full of excitement and ideas. And it was of course mimicking how I was feeling in the very beginning of, oh my gosh, I have all these cool ideas and my brain's on fire and I can't wait to create them and see what it looks like when they're outside of my brain. And so when we're looking at motivational interviewing, going back to that idea of engagement, it's important to, when we're either doing this work on our own with ourselves or with someone else, to make sure that we, again, are creating that safe space where we or a client can explore our feelings and our motivations and desire for change. So if we're thinking about a fictional client, I chose a client named Maya. And Maya is this creative entrepreneur who is absolutely an artist, like through and through. Like that's what they love to do. They love being in that mindset. And they've been able to make a business out of it. However, and it's their full-time job, they're struggling really to stay consistent with the business side of things. So all the accounting stuff, the paperwork stuff, they're an artist, so their brain doesn't function that way. They're like, hey, I really want to do all this fun, creative stuff, and all the other stuff really stresses me out. They really want to focus on what they love to do, which is the creating, the artistry, and the day-to-day work really kind of bogs them down and stresses them out. And what happens is they end up feeling really stuck in these cycles of both inspiration and burnout. So of course they're getting inspiration to create new products for their store, but then burnout because they've made this their job. There are all these other kind of moving pieces and obligations that they have to tend to that really kind of take some of the joy and excitement out of their job. And I chose this fictional client example specifically because I see it so much. I work with so many artists, both personally and professionally. And this is the theme that I see the most. So a question that would be part of this kind of like engagement Ace of Wands energy would be something along the lines of, what originally made you start your business? What originally made you lean into this idea that you could take your creativity and make it your career? So through this question, we're really kind of strengthening the engagement. We're showing interest in either ourselves or a client for this example of why they're doing what they're doing. Because the goal here, the change eventually, is to get Maya to work through feeling stuck and burnt out related to all the business side of things because they've really fallen behind. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so that Ace of Wands energy, so if you were working with Maya, you might pull the Ace of Wands out and say, this is representing that very first spark, that passion, the reason you began this. And for motivational interviewing, the idea of engagement, that first of the four processes, really means helping clients reconnect to that kind of original spark. And through active listening and really holding space and affirming, their own kind of desires and interests and that initial Ace of Wands energy, it allows them to get back to the root of why they're doing what they're doing. So then we can move on to the Two of Wands, which I feel like aligns great with that focusing component. So this is when we're really going to start trying to develop a clear direction for working together or creating a plan for ourselves. So once you've done some work with that Ace of Wands energy, really spending time thinking about that initial spark and that passion and their reason, right? Like the reason why. Then we move on to focusing, helping either the client we're working with or trying to guide ourselves to define what it is that we're working towards. Like, okay, we know why we're doing this, but where do we need to be? And what's kind of like getting in the way of where we need to be and what we need to be working towards. So this is very Two of Wandsy because it's a moment of vision and decision making. You know, you want something, but you're not sure, when, where, how to take the leap. And so the Two of Wands does a really good job identifying and expressing those very universal feelings. So for our fictional client, Maya, this might look like them looking at any sort of current habits that maybe aren't aligning with their long-term goals. So this would be some of the questions that I might ask Maya, or we could even ask ourselves are, if you could fully step into this version of yourself that you want to be, in Maya's case, they want to be an artist and also a really great, just a functioning business person. And so I would ask, what would that look like? What would you be doing differently? And this is when ideally we'll start to find some discrepancy between our wants and our values and our actual behavior versus, kind of like what's going on. So like if we're looking at, what would you be doing differently if you were kind of functioning as this person that you want to function as? And then we start to realize, oh, I'm not quite functioning near that level at all. It gives us a jumping off point. And this is what leads us into the Three of Wands and that idea of evoking. And I always make sure to take a strengths-based approach here because anytime we're thinking about or exploring changing a behavior, we have to remember either from ourselves, if we're doing self-work or if we're working with a client, there's always so much shame attached to this type of work. And we're also talking a lot about behavior that we feel like isn't right or that is wrong or that needs to be different, which can really just reinforce those feelings of shame. And so we want to make sure that for ourselves and other people, we're still pointing out, hey, I am doing this thing correctly, or I'm really strong or resilient when it comes to that thing over there. So yeah, once we're kind of working towards envisioning this, path forward, being able to identify our strengths or our client's strengths is really important because that's what gives us the confidence in order to feel like we can step into this next role or even just take one step forward towards making a change. When we're wanting to make change and wanting things to be different, we need momentum. And it's hard to get momentum going when we feel like we're constantly just focusing on everything that we're doing wrong. So the Three of Wands, I feel like, is that kind of winding up process. And we're really trying to start build up that momentum to keep us moving and then eventually propel us forward, which we would, fully realize with the Eight of Wands. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself now. Another important component of the Three of Wands is this idea of change talk and working to evoke our own reasons and motivations for change. Or if we're working with a client, their kind of why. Like, why is it that we need to change? And sometimes it's important too, again, because, talking about that idea of shame, we also want to talk about not just the things we're doing wrong or that need to be changed, but also why the change will be worth it. So if we're thinking about this fictional client who's really struggling with procrastination, with all the kind of business side of things, with their art career, we might ask, why is change worth it for you? What might you gain out of adjusting or modifying the way you're functioning within your business? And ideally, Maya might say something like, well, when I'm in a flow state or when I feel really confident or I feel like everything's kind of taken care of for the most part and I'm not stressing about the bills that need to get paid or the phone calls that need to be made or the emails that need to be returned, I can really step into my creativity and feel really incredible about my work. So you're really trying to identify that type of feeling. It's very also similar to the original Ace of Wands feeling. So really wanting to reinforce and look for, some of that positive evidence that we are, that it's even worth working through motivational interviewing and that we are kind of on the right path here. Then we can move on to the Four of Wands, which I know that we typically think about the Four of Wands as a celebratory card. And absolutely, like we can for sure, like that pertains here as well, because when we're working through any sort of change process, we absolutely need to be celebrating small wins. If we're only focused on end goal, big outcome, we're going to burn out really quickly and probably won't even finish the process. So in this case, Four of Wands, definitely we can still look at the traditional meaning here, all about celebrating ourselves and other people along the way, cheering them on. However, there's also a component of planning here. Think about the Four of Wands as, people tend to think of it as like the wedding card too. Think about how much goes into planning a wedding or just any sort of big event like that. So I kind of encourage you to look at the Four of Wands in this case as the planning component of motivational interviewing. So if we're thinking about this in terms of planning and celebrating for, this fictional client, Maya, we might come up with this plan to choose one day out of the week where it's, an hour or two that they're in front of their computer responding to emails. And then, once that has happened, so we've planned for that, making sure you're celebrating like, hey, hell yeah, like I just got through all those emails, and making sure that you're acknowledging that process. Eventually, we're all going to find ourselves in the Five of Wands of change, where we're battling either with ourselves. Okay, so there's a couple things here. Battling with ourselves internally, because I really like looking at the Five of Wands as kind of the inner conflict, all these different parts of ourselves. But something that's really important here is that this also could represent external relationships, external people, because any time that we make a change, it's probably also going to make other people uncomfortable because they're so used to having us function a certain way, or maybe even benefiting when we were functioning a certain way, even if it was harmful to us. And so now they're expressing resistance or frustration or discontent with the fact that we are making changes. So this is a really important part of the process to, one, be aware of and make sure that you have a plan for how you're going to work through that. Looking at this through an internal perspective, though, this inner conflict, the Five of Wands is really going to make us second guess ourselves when we are making any sort of change. So this could happen if we are in the process of, implementing some of these plans that we created and then coming up against some obstacles or something not going the way that we thought it would. And then immediately going to that space of, oh, I'm not good enough. Why bother? This is very Five of Wands, us kind of battling with ourselves. And then what happens if we don't work through that resistance or we don't work through that shame and the self-criticism? That's where we get stuck. And then we end up in this like perpetual cycle of starting and stopping. So we have to really work on making sure that we're prepared for that inner conflict or external conflict that could happen. Something important about this experience, though, especially in motivational interviewing, is we're not necessarily wanting to find a way to remove the conflict or the resistance. You really want to hold space for it and explore it, talk about it, work through it, say, okay, yeah, you failed at this thing. That's the truth. There's no changing that. It is what it is. You implemented this new plan. It didn't work. It didn't go the way you wanted it to. And it's, not great. So instead of looking at it as a hard failure and why bother, why move forward, what would happen if we looked at it as just a part of the process? Because no matter what happens in our life, we're going to be met with these obstacles of things that we mess up or don't go well, but it doesn't mean that we just stop altogether. It's just a part of the process. So we're essentially just trying to neutralize, but making sure that we're not invalidating or dismissing the discomfort of things not going well. Then after the 5 of Wands, we've got the 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Wands. And this is a whole journey. So of course we have the 6 of Wands where, after you experience that inner or outer conflict of the 5 of Wands and you kind of get your footing again, and it's like when you get that initial boost of confidence after you worked through something really difficult, then you're like 6 of Wandsing it and you're just like, hell yeah, like I did this. But then, that doesn't last forever either. So then we have the 7, 8, 9, 10 of Wands experience that I think really beautifully highlights what it's like to go through a change process. So after the 6 of Wands experience, then, we probably have another 7 of Wands where we're up against something, either another obstacle, another perceived or actual failure, or ourself, and having to kind of stand there and confront the resistance or confront the discomfort. And then the 8 of Wands, this is inevitable in every process. We're always going to get that kind of boost of energy to just go at some point. And it doesn't, it lasts at varying degrees for lots of people. Some people that might last for weeks, months, or years where they're just going. And other people, they might get it in spurts. Maybe it's 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, but it's going to look different for everybody. But I think enjoying those 8 of Wands moments are going to be really important, and know that they will come eventually. And then, of course, 9 of Wands, you're going to get exhausted. And this is another big speed bump where folks might say, okay, I'm going to give up, because you start to feel really frustrated. You start to be like, okay, hey, I've, these 8 Wands behind me is everything that I've accomplished thus far. And I'm holding on to this 9th one. And I either just feel like I'm tired, I can't do it anymore, or I'm not being recognized. No one else is seeing the change and the progress. Is it even worth it? So this is really kind of the questioning. Should I even be here? And then the 10 of Wands, really, I love that the 9 and 10 of Wands are the cards that they are, because I feel like the 9 of Wands really speaks to those of us who feel like you have to do it all on your own, because then the 10 of Wands shows what happens when you do that. How just brutally painful it looks. Like that doesn't look fun. And so the lesson in the 10 of Wands then becomes, okay, now you've done all this work essentially on your own, but you have to really be able to know yourself and know this process and know when it's time to kind of lighten your load so that you can avoid burnout. So for this fictional client, Maya, to go back to them, I think Maya was actually burnt out from the beginning when they were talking about being really frustrated about not being able to maintain all of these kind of the business aspects of their art business, and being really frustrated with themselves and really feeling like they had to do it all on their own, and figure out the process. And so I think in this case, talking about everything that needs to be done, breaking things down into what are you good at and what do you enjoy versus what can be outsourced. Otherwise, we get to this 9 of 10 of Wands and we just feel like, okay, it's time to quit, or I am not meant to do this. It's not meant to be, or I shouldn't have bothered changing, whatever it is, insert, I shouldn't have. And the 9 and 10 of Wands isn't proof that you should quit. It's just data that things need to be modified or adjusted. So that was the Suit of Wands and motivational interviewing. Thank you for letting me nerd out about that. I hope it made sense, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I do want to end the episode with a brief exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull some cards, and I'm going to pull cards related to this fictional client I've talked about, Maya. And so if you're on the email list, you saw this spread go out with the episode announcement. If you're not on my email list, you should be, because I announce all kinds of things there first. So yeah, this is a 3-card spread just to explore kind of the energy that we were talking about, the Suit of Wands and motivational interviewing. So we're going to be looking at that initial spark, that initial Ace of Wands energy. Then we're going to be looking at some kind of 5 and 7 of Wands energy. So challenges that get in the way. And then the third card is going to be action. So this is very Knight of Wandsy, which I know I didn't go into the court cards. I might do that another time. There's just a lot that you could do with those. So yeah, and I didn't want this episode to be too long. So let's go ahead and pull the 3 cards for this spread for Maya. And feel free to pull along with me if you have your deck. And to stay on brand with the theme, I'm actually using Jessica Doerr's The Change Tarot today. I felt like that was very fitting. So card 1 is going to represent the spark, that initial motivation for change, or the initial motivation related to the passion that you're experiencing. Well, in this case, for Maya, for her wanting to start this creative business. All right, so card 1. Oh, that's great, actually. Four of Swords. Okay, so I would say for this fictional client, and because they're not real, I'm totally kind of making this up so you can kind of see my reading process. The 4 of Swords as, okay, either representing her intrinsic motivation for change, or what initially led her to want to, or have this kind of spark of energy. If it was the initial spark of energy to combine her art and turn it into a business, I would look at the 4 of Swords and say it allowed her to bring her kind of internal world to fruition. So when she's in quiet contemplation and she's really thinking about designs or different forms of art, or even dreaming about being able to have a job that allows her to just make art every day. I mean, this person in the 4 of Swords is seemingly sleeping. But if we're looking at it as the kind of that motivation for change, I would say that I'm tired and I don't know how much more I can do. I feel like when I lay my head down at night, all these looming tasks that need to be completed that I'm not capable of completing are just kind of hanging over my head. So there's that. So card 2 would be the challenge. So what sort of ambivalence does Maya have when it comes to, looking at behaviors that need to be changed so that she can function more fully in her business? Or, what sort of external barriers exist? The spread, I'm kind of making this up as I go along. The spread that will eventually go out to my email list, well, that is already out because you're listening to this episode, will be more defined. But you're kind of hearing me workshop it now as I'm shuffling the deck and thinking about all this. So yeah, this is going to be kind of the 5 and 7 of Wands energy. So resistance and ambivalence. Oh, that's funny. 3 of Pentacles reversed. Okay, so clearly the resistance here would be feeling like they can't ask for help, feeling like they have to do it all on their own, that they just have to figure it out themselves. That one was easy. All right, so then card 3 would be action. So like, what steps do you need to take to start working through the resistance of the 3 of Pentacles? Ooh, another reversal. The Emperor reversed. Okay. I know this is also easy. I feel like this is all about stepping out of rigidity and letting go of control, especially when you're a business owner, and all the clients that I have that are very similar to Maya that kind of influence this fictional client. There is a lot of trepidation around relinquishing some control, letting somebody in. Yeah, so I think the Emperor reversed here is very much saying, hey, the action is to let that shit go. Let people in so you can experience that 3 of Pentacles so that you don't have to feel like 3 swords are, staring at you or hanging above your head every night when you go to sleep. All right, well, that was Motivational Interviewing and the Suit of Wands. Thank you all for nerding out with me, and I can't wait to hear what you thought of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow The Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails, where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.